Right now, though, I want to bring in our friend Bobby Chacon, former FBI agent, attorney. Bobby, thank you for joining us.
Sure, Doctor. Thank you for having me.
So James Comey's testimony, should it happen, let me ask this about the so-called, what did he call it, the little notation he made to himself after his meeting with President Trump? His memo?
His memo?
Memo.
Yeah, his memo.
So FBI agents' memos are essentially like, in terms of when a memo like that would come to court, it would be like a tape recording, essentially, right? I mean, it's considered that level of certainty, is it not?
There are certain criteria that must be met for it. Contemporaneous. It must be made contemporaneous, which means it must be made shortly after as reasonable from the events that you're recollecting, so that your memory is still fresh, right?
Right.
So there are certain criteria like that has to happen. But once you do that and put it into the file, sure, it's a contemporaneous statement. It's a recollection. It's a memory. It's a statement.
But it's thought to be something. It means something in a court of law.
Well, sure. I mean, but the weight wouldn't be. I would hate to equate it with a tape recording where you actually have the other person.
Okay.
Because it's the old, like in law school they taught us that a verbal contract is just as good as a written contract,
right.
And in legal terms it might be. However, you're always going to have a disagreement about a verbal contract about what was actually said verbally. Right. So that's why you memorialize things.
Okay. So that's kind of what I wanted to dig in at. So if Mr. Trump had said, "Oh, geez, I wish this thing would go away. I hope you'll drop it. He's a good guy." Just sort of if he sort of matter of factly as they're walking out the door, going like, "Oh, this thing's so very upsetting to me. I wish you'd just drop it." Isn't that different than Comey saying, "I felt that he was overextending his power at that point"? How do you reconcile? How do we reconcile those two different let's call them what they are, recollections?
Well, and that's going to be crucial. I mean, and that's why a lot of times in some of these kind of attempted prosecutions, they never even go forward. Prosecutors always want to feel very confident that they have evidence, and when you have a he said type of situation, it's going to be a tough case. Whether it's obstruction of justice is always a difficult thing to charge and to convict on because of the intent. So you're right. If the president was, but again, there are people that are looking at this, and we both know that if your boss calls you into your meeting and he asks the two bosses that are kind of operate between you in the corporate ladder to leave the room, the hairs on the back of your neck start to stand up.
Yeah.
And this is not just hey, he's a good guy. This is everybody else leave the room. I want to talk to this guy. And then he sits down knee to knee with you and kind of leans in and says, this is a good guy. So I
got to tell you that's classic narcissistic strategy. Though here's the piece you left out, because a real narcissist, what they'll do, a narcissistic leader, which is common, it's a very common sort of leadership style. They'll lean in and go, "You're my special man. I can only trust you," right? And so
with the hand on the knee or the hand on the shoulder.
Yeah, I can only trust you. That's why I had everyone else out of the room, because I know you are such a man of upstanding, whatever. And that's the way narcissists lead. That's the way they do it. They anoint people and they make them their special man and stuff. And again, in doing so, then that person would go, "I sure am upset about this thing. God, isn't it tough? Isn't it awful?" Sort of share with that person your emotions and not really say anything else. But that's their style. And is that a miscarriage of justice?
Well, yeah, right. And prosecutor have to go, am I going to get a jury of 12 people in this case, maybe not, because the prosecution of a sitting president is somewhat legally different, right?
Well, is it going to create, could it create grounds for impeachment is my question. Even if it could, how do they get that through a Republican Congress?
I don't think you do. I mean,
right.
I think it would be hard to get through a 12-person jury without generating some kind of sympathy from one person that says, well, maybe he really was just kind of going, "Hey, he's a good guy. I hope he can get a break on this."
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's tough. It's a tough case. And, like you said, I mean, narcissists are successful because they know that, right?
Well, intuitively.
Right,
yeah.
right. And then that's the problem in this case, and that's why I understand people's frustration, and but in this type of world that we're in now, of course, if you don't go forward with an impeachment, it's going to be political. But really, could you get that kind of agreement among people? I don't know. It's a tough one. It only really two. It's one of those situations. It's really only two people know what happened in that room.
let's talk about.
That was obviously by design.
Let's talk about James Comey, because you're an FBI agent. What do you think he's thinking today?
Oh man, he's probably thinking, "How did I ever get here?" This has all of this has so little to do with his actual job. He came in with a lot of integrity. I think, he tried to do the right thing at every turn, and every turn it seemed to go wrong for him. And so, I don't think that it's completely on him. I think it's to some extent he's the victim of this hugely polarized atmosphere inside the Beltway these days, and nobody can seem to do anything right according to the other side, and so everybody is looked at as, how can we best exploit this person to our own advantage politically?
Right, that's right.
And so,
and then the rest of us suffer. The country suffers. Of course,
because the government basically shuts down, and it becomes a schoolyard tussle. And so everybody loses sight of the ultimate goal, and Comey, I'm sure, is scratching his head and going, he tried to do his job, and he just got dragged into this milieu that just, he couldn't get out of. And it's unfortunate for a good man like that. It's unfortunate that, that this happened to him. And I'm sitting here wondering who's the next person this is going to happen to,
right.
who, and because everybody forgets about what he did in the job, and what, now it's all about intent, and it's all about politics, and whose side did he help more, and whose side did he hurt more.
It's scapegoating. It's horrible scapegoating behavior.
Absolutely.
It's very primitive. It's, it's tearing apart bodies and things. I don't understand.
I don't see it getting any better in the short term.
Well, how do we get out of it is my question. I mean, I hate to say it, but
I think you need, I don't know. It's going to take a leader to emerge inside the Beltway or from outside the Beltway, wherever. It's going to take a leader to emerge that has, the backing of certain people on each side, and say, this has got to stop. We've got to think of the country, the betterment of the country. We've got to move forward on some of these things. We've got to forget about, the white noise, and we've got to look at what's best for the country. If you hate this guy and you want to see him go to jail, or if you hate this woman and you want to see her indicted, all of that is white noise to what's best for the country going forward. What do we do that's best? And people have to, I hate to say it, but maybe swallow some of their anger and dampen some of their rhetoric. But it's going to take a leader, that's of unquestionable integrity. Maybe even from outside of politics, that comes in and says, look, this has got to stop.
Do you have any, is there anyone that you could think of as somebody who could be a good candidate for this role? Or is it going to come out of God knows where?
I don't know if it's got to be, like a Bill Gates, or, it's somebody with a platform, somebody that, I hate to say, but doesn't have much to lose and can kind of but I know those, people are sitting on the sidelines of, why should I expose myself to that? Because the minute I do, I am going to get attacked.
Yeah.
My life is going to get attacked. My family is going to get attacked.
Yeah.
Every bit of my life is going to be examined. Every media outlet is going to try to find something that says I'm doing this for this side, or I'm doing this for that side.
Terrible. Well, what is going to happen to Congress now is demanding these memos from Comey. What's going to happen? What's going to happen with those memos, and how's this going to work?
I don't know. It's kind of uncharted territory. I mean, a lot of people are harking back to the Watergate days and things like that, but they're going to have hearings, and I'm not a big fan of congressional hearings. They never seem to have an ultimate end game. But they're going to have hearings. They're going to, march him out there. They're going to drag him out there. They're going to get whatever is in those memos, and they're going to try to make political points. Each side is going to make political points based on what's in the memo. I mean, that's all it is. I have no hope anymore for these things to actually get anything done for the good of the people. They're going to drag him out there, and one party is going to, try to make its points, and the other party is going to make its points. And, he has nothing to gain, right? He will only lose, because what does he have to gain by doing this? But, they'll drag him up there. They'll subpoena him if necessary, and they'll drag him up there, and they'll punch him around like they did, in his last testimony when he was still the director. That I don't see this as any, I know there are people out there that go, yeah, but we've got to impeach, and that's what it's all about.
And didn't I
down to the Russians? That's what
right,
it's all
the
about.
Russians, and already people are forgetting about that now. I told you, week to week. Did you remember what the press's hair was caught on fire about 6 weeks ago, a month ago,
Not
3
only
weeks
week
ago?
To week. We're talking about day to day.
Yeah.
I was on with Doug McIntyre 2 days ago talking about the leak of classified information inside the Oval Office.
Yeah.
And the next day, when the memo story broke, that story was gone.
Gone. It's just things that were making people apoplectic. It just moves on to something else. It's absolutely weird.
I spent hours reviewing, NSA and CIA guidelines on spillage and what we do. I knew the Bureau's policies on spillage and how to talk about, spilling of classified information and how you contain it and things like that. And Doug had me on and we spoke about it. And then the very next day, that story is not even talked about.
And it was it's a big deal. That was a big deal.
It's huge. It's still
that should be the biggest deal, right? I mean, that's the thing that really is concerning. Where's that coming from?
Yeah, and some people are saying it's by design. It's Trump's. That's the way he gets things off the. He's able to move the issue off the table and on to the next one. And everybody's concentrating on the new shiny object. But I mean, I think we will circle back to that because he has a visit coming up to Israel or the Middle East, and obviously Israel is a part of that story now.
Something will happen there. Something will make us crazy. All right, Bobby, can you stay with me for a minute? Because
sure,
I have some callers. I want to give them a chance to ask you questions, and we'll get right back to Bobby Chacon after the break. It's Midday Live. Dr. Drew, Mike Cathwood. It's Talk Radio 790 K.